the flow of thought. To enjoy a mental activity, one must meet the same conditions that make physical activities enjoyable. There must be skill in symbolic domain. There have to be rules, a goal, and a way of obtaining feedback. One must be able to concentrate and interact with the opportunities at a level commensurate with one's skills. 1192. Unless a person knows how to give order to his or her thoughts, attention will be attracted to whatever is most problematic at the moment. It will focus on some real or imaginary pain, or recent grudges, or long-term frustrations. Entropy is the normal state of consciousness, a condition that is neither useful nor enjoyable. To avoid this condition, people are naturally eager to fill their minds with whatever information is readily available, as long as it distracts attention from turning inward and dwelling on negative feelings. This explains why such a huge proportion of time is invested in watching television, despite the fact that it is very rarely enjoyed. Compared to other sources of stimulation like reading, talking to other people, or working on a hobby, TV can provide continuous and easily accessible information that will structure the viewer's attention at a very low cost in terms of the psychic energy that needs to be invested. Why people watch television, they need not fear that their drifting minds will force them to face disturbing personal problems. It is understandable that once one develops this strategy for overcoming psychic entropy, to give up the habit becomes almost impossible. The murder of science. 1232. But for a person who has nothing to remember, life can become severely impoverished. This possibility was completely overlooked by educational reformers early in the century, who, armed with research results, proved that rote learning was not an efficient way to store and acquire information. As a result of their efforts, rote learning was phased out of the schools. The reformers would have had justification if the point of remembering was simply to solve practical problems. But if control of consciousness is judged to be at least as important as the ability to get things done, then learning complex patterns of information by heart is by no means a waste of effort. A mind with some stable content to it is much richer than one would doubt. It is a mistake to assume that creativity and rote learning are incompatible. Some of the most original scientists, for instance, have been known to have memorized music, poetry, or historical information extensively. A person who can remember stories, poems, lyrics of songs, baseball statistics, chemical formulas, mathematical operations, historical dates, biblical passages, and wise quotations has many advantages over one who has not cultivated such a skill. The consciousness of such a person is independent of the order that may or may not be provided by the environment. She can always amuse herself and find meaning in the contents of her mind, while others need external stimulation, television, reading, conversation, or drugs to keep their minds from drifting into chaos. The person whose memory is stocked with patterns of information is autonomous and self-contained. Additionally, such a person is also a much more cherished companion because she can share the information in her mind and thus help bring order into the consciousness of those with whom she interacts. How can one find more value in memory? The most natural way to begin is to decide what subject one is really interested in. poetry, fine cuisine, the history of the Civil War, or baseball, then start paying attention to key facts and figures in that chosen area. With a good grasp of the subject will come the knowledge of what is worth remembering and what is not. The important thing to recognize here is that you should not feel that you have to observe a string of facts, that there is a right list you must memorize. If you decide that what you would like to have in memory, the information will be under your control, and the whole process of learning by heart will become a pleasant task instead of a chore imposed from outside. A Civil War buff need not feel compelled to know the sequence of days of all major engagements. If, for instance, he is interested in the role of the artillery, then only those battles where cannot played an important part need concern him. Some people carry with them the test of choice poems of quotation written on piece of paper to glance over whenever they feel bored or dispirited. It is amazing what a sense of control it gives to know what that favorite facts or lyrics are always at hand. Once they are stored in memory, however, this feeling of ownership or better, of contentment connectedness with the content recorded become even more intense. 1264. The rules of the games of the mind. Great thinkers have always been motivated by the enjoyment of thinking rather than by the material rewards that could be gained by it. The surviving fragments of Democritus' writing illustrate how rewarding he found the practice of thinking to be. It is godlike ever to think of something beautiful and something new. Happiness does not reside in strength of money. It lies in dryness and many sadness. I would rather discover one true cause than gain the kingdom of Persia. Not surprisingly, some of his more enlightened contemporaries concluded that Democritus had a cheerful disposition and said that he called cheerfulness and often confidence that is a mind devoid of fear the highest good. In other words, he enjoyed life because he had learned to control his consciousness. 1273. Sometimes having control over such um, an internalized symbol as system can save one's life. It has been claimed, for instance, that the reason there are more poets per capita in Iceland than in any other country in the world is that reciting the sagas became a way for the Icelanders to keep their consciousness ordered in an environment exceedingly exceedingly hostile to human existence. For centuries, the Icelanders have not only preserved in memory, but also added new verses to the epics chronicling the deeds of their ancestors. Isolated in the freezing night, they used to chant their poems huddled around fires in precarious huts, while outside the winds of the interminable Arctic winters hold. If the Icelander had spent all those nights in silence listening to the mocking wind, their minds would have soon filled with dread and despair. By mastering the orderly cadence of meter and rhythm, and in casting the events of their own lives in verbal images, they succeeded instead in taking control of their experiences. In the face of chaotic snowstorms, they create songs with form and meaning. To what extent did the sagas help the Icelanders endure? Would they have survived without them? There is no way to answer these questions with certainty, but who would dare to try the experiment? 1282. Similar conditions hold true when individuals are suddenly ranged from civilization and find themselves in those extreme situations we described earlier, such as concentration camps or polar expeditions. Whenever the outside world offers no mercy, an internal symbolic systems can become a salvation. Anyone in possession of portable rules for the mind has a great advantage. In conditions of extreme deprivation, poets, mathematicians, musicians, historians, and biblical experts have stood out as islands of Sanity is surrounded by the waves of chaos. To a certain extent, farmers who know the life of the fields or lumbermen who understand the forest have a similar support system. But because their knowledge is less abstractly coded, they have more need to interact with the actual environment to be in control. Okay, that's it.